What could happen to Fife house prices in 2026? The burning question to start the year. But before we get into it, let's QVT. So it's
This is going to be an interesting one, isn't it?
It is, yes. And a great one to start the year with, and probably a topic that a lot of people will be wondering. So yeah, we're into the new year, well into the new year, and there's many local homeowners that are probably starting to question this and obviously wondering, should they bring their home to market in January? Do you wait to spring, summer? And honestly, Perrie, this was even a question we were getting asked at the end of last year as well, coming into the new year. This is something we get asked about so much, and we talk about probably till we're blue in the face about when is the best time to come to market.
Mhm.
And this is why this is a fantastic show to give you all of the information to help make those informed decisions. What I would say is if you are watching this and you want to read the blog instead, perhaps feel free to hit the link. You can absolutely do that. Likewise, if you have any questions, if there's anything that you wish to share, please do so. We would love to hear from you and put it in the comments. Even if you're watching the rerun, absolutely do that and reach out to us, because it's a conversation that is happening with many buyers, sellers, people that just take a keen interest, and even your investors, buy to let landlords. And it was definitely ramping up, I would say, on the approach to Christmas. And then as we obviously now are into the new year, it is also a conversation, even as a prime example, yesterday evaluation, getting asked that question, do I need to wait till spring, summer to go to market? Absolutely not. And this is why we're going to get into it and show you, because it is a question that is coming up. But
It's
something that will
it's a really interesting one, actually, Sophie, because I've done some shows about the Boxing Day bounce, for instance. You know, a lot of people think that that's a myth, and many agents aren't open over Christmas and New Year. We always are, but a lot of agents are not open over that time span, and many of them will say, well, actually, it's a myth, it doesn't exist. But we proved that wrong, didn't we? Because we launched 3 properties on Boxing Day, and it was astounding the response that we got. And we had sales on New Year's Eve after viewings in between as well. But actually, I don't know if you saw it, Sophie, but interestingly, yesterday on Sky News on Ridge and Frost, Phil Spencer was on it. And even Phil Spencer was asked the question, what does he think the market will do in 2026? And whilst it's very early to tell, of course, because we're only into week 2, one of the things that he did actually talk about is the fact that actually on Boxing Day, there was actually the record ever activity on the portals for people property searching. And his feedback was that actually, and it's the same as what we're saying, is that, yes, it's early to tell, but what is very obvious is that many people perhaps had put things on hold towards the end of last year. There was that feeling we don't really know what's going to happen in the budget. We don't know what interest rates are going to do. They'd frozen, then the meetings were cancelled. Then the meeting happened again and it did reduce. And so people are starting to get a little bit of buyer confidence. And so I think that's why we saw that record activity on Boxing Day. And that is going to stream into the new year. And actually, we say this often, Sophie, don't we? But he actually stipulated exactly what we say, and that is that people have to move. They have their reasons. They could be births, there could be deaths, unfortunately. There could be marriages, there could be separations, there could be changings of schools. There's many reasons why they do. And people's lives still go on. And when you're at the start of a new year, it's a really good time to assess that. So we talked about that in our recent show that we did last week, and to actually hear him say it as well was just an endorsement of the fact that actually that is where the market is. We are doing all of the right things, and actually our job is really to give you guidance, give you advice, give you facts so that you can kind of move on and make really assured choices. And as Sophie says, when we get into what 2026 potentially may look like for you, hopefully we'll give you some good insight. But also, if you've experienced something like that in that window of time, we would really love to hear it, because it's great for us to be able to share with our audiences as well. But I just thought that was a really interesting thing when Phil Spence did that. I actually paused it, rewound it, and watched it about 3 times because I thought, you're talking about exactly what we did. And it was really interesting.
Absolutely. And it was interesting because obviously there was agencies out there, and even I was seeing agencies from out with Fife saying about it that, oh, don't get bogged down in that. Agents will try and sell you this story to get the list and etc. etc. Don't get bogged down with it. And this is why we always say deal with the facts. And obviously that was record breaking numbers on Boxing Day on the portals. You can't argue with black and white and when you're seeing the facts and the statistics. And that's why it's so important to educate yourself. And also
Definitely.
not get bogged down on the noise that you hear around. You're still in the numbers and the facts. But no, it was interesting to see, definitely. So this is then a nice natural flow on to give more guidance as we do obviously go throughout and start the year off, because summer homeowners will absolutely, especially first-time buyers, worry that they're about to purchase perhaps before a potential downturn. However, obviously, as you've obviously touched on there, Perrie, in terms of obviously the base rates, it froze, it cancelled, and they came down. That gave that buyer confidence. Likewise, it does to obviously those first-time buyers. And actually, and we're still seeing it. And even some of the properties, for example, of a first-time buyer, even what they're affording and kind of the price points that they're going for is more than it has usually been as well. And people will be surprised when we'll perhaps come forward and say, look, we've got somebody looking to view, they're actually a first-time buyer, and they go, oh, for this price point? Yeah, absolutely. So don't always get bogged down in it. But yes, first-time buyers and perhaps anybody is nervous to do that move or was nervous to do that move. But as Perrie said, there is that buyer confidence, and some homeowners want to know whether there'll be a boom perhaps, or whether the market might top before that they sell. There's also a number of landlords that perhaps feel stuck. They're perhaps looking at their portfolio, evaluating things, looking at numbers and wondering, do I add to my portfolio? Do I just stick with what I've got? Why fix it if it's not broken? Or do we look at starting to offload some of the portfolio? Now, with all of this, obviously, absolutely, it could just be hypotheticals that we're speaking about here because nobody has a crystal ball. We can't predict what is going to happen. We can obviously look for those changes within the different, obviously, things happening in the marketplace. But most property experts are not predicting doom and gloom, but yet will we see a boom? And this is, we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to give you some great figures, because when people ask where Fife house prices are heading, they often look for predictions or forecasts or bold headlines. And we get it all the time, even again yesterday, prime question, how much do you think you're going to get from a home? We get it all the time.
And actually, interestingly, I've got a property coming to market, and that client is saying, this is my number, this is my magic number. Can you assure me you'll get that magic number? And what I have said is, here's a proven history. I've given case studies that shows where we have exceeded. I've given the information about our marketing strategy, our pre-portal video, how that absolutely captures the market and the foot traffic, personal property tour, the feedback that we get from buyers in the fact that that's actually such a unique way to buy a property. And 95% of our buyers actually, before they actually visit the house, are convinced it's the one for them. So I've talked about all of those things, but I have had to caveat and say, but I cannot guarantee that that is the number that you'll get. But what I can guarantee is that we've got the right strategy. We can create that audience participation. We can get that foot traffic for you. And then it's about how we negotiate for you. And we will absolutely get you the best number that we can. But I can't categorically, in black and white, capital letters, say, this will be that number. No one can do that. We don't have crystal balls. You're absolutely right there, Sophie. But we can talk about our strategy. We can talk about our market knowledge, our buyer knowledge, and our negotiations. And that's really all we can do, is do the best job that we can with all the tools that are available to us to try and achieve the best outcome that we can for that particular client. And so sometimes actually there is a little bit of a leap of faith as well, isn't there? But as you mentioned, Sophie, you're taking that leap of faith with sound information that has been demonstrated to you, and you're confident as a seller that actually you're in a safe pair of hands. And that was one of the other things that Phil Spencer said yesterday when he talked about that Boxing Day bounce and that record-breaking activity on the portals on Boxing Day and how the new year potentially will start. One of the other things that he also said is do your homework and pick a good agent and get your price point right. And get a good strategy for your marketing. And those were the key things that he spoke about. And absolutely, that's what I said to that client. And I said, really now it's up to you to make a choice. And so it's difficult because some people want that. Yes, we will hold their hands through the journey, but we can't give any guarantees on anything. No one can.
Nobody can. But I think you're absolutely right. And they are looking for you to almost go, yep, I'll get you that number. And there will be an element of some agencies, if people are obviously getting a couple of different quotes, that will go, yep, I'll get you that number just to get the listing. We like to just be open, honest. As you said, this is what we do. That obviously has had proven results. We're also not going to say absolutely, yes, I will get that for you, no doubt about it, because that's also not realistic.
And it's not true.
Yeah. And you do have to think of that if you are comparing agents, do think of that. Absolutely. And don't get kind of caught up in that and just get the blinders on for it. And obviously, the direction of any property market is driven by something far, far more basic. House prices at their kind of core are a simple function of demand and supply. And that's simply it. When there are more buyers than homes available, prices are supported. When the balance tips the other way, prices perhaps soften. Now, strip away that noise, that relationship has not changed ever. And that's where we're now going to really look at the numbers, and we're going to kick off with supply of Fife homes. What does that look like, Perrie?
I think absolutely looking at the supply of Fife homes does demonstrate where the market is going, and it's crucial that you understand that. And at the moment, I'm doing a kind of 31-day communication piece where I'm doing like a little snippet video each day for 90 seconds. And yesterday, one of the first things I said was that actually, as a seller and as a buyer, it's really important that you do your homework, look at your area, understand your market, because actually price points change, not just from postcodes, but actually they can change even from streets in some locations. So if you can understand that, then it will guide you as a seller and a buyer as to what the expectation should be moving forward if you're looking to buy a property in that location, or if you're thinking of selling in that location. So for me, it's absolutely true to do that. So if we look at the number of properties for sale, it tells us more about the likely direction of a house price rather than actually the headline forecast. With that in mind, for me as well, you have to look at how many homes are currently on the market in Fife. So what is available in Fife? When you do your weekly update on a Tuesday, Sophie, not only do you talk about what is available in Fife, but you actually break it into the micro regions as well. So you'll have the East Neuk, you'll have St Andrews, Cooper, Gibbens, Kirkcaldy, Glenrothes, and you'll really break it down so that people can get a really good idea of what is happening in those locations. And you're showing people what is coming to market, as in new listings. You're also showing people what's gone under offer, and then you're showing what percentage of that come to market has actually gone under offer. And I think that for me is a really good way to look at property. So if we look at, for instance, what is coming to market and actual supply in the Fife area in January of 2020, that feels like forever ago now, we're in 26, doesn't it? We speak about COVID and we talk about it being 5 years, and I'm thinking, gosh, it's going to be 6 soon enough. You know, it just seems to have somersaulted this last little while, doesn't it?
Yes.
But anyway, if we do look at January of 2020, we started the year with 1,859 Fife homes for sale in that January. In January of 21, it was 1,416. So that was over 400 less. If we then go to January of 22, it was down to 942 properties that were available. That's almost 1,000 properties less in a 2-year window. Now, obviously, that's over that period when COVID was kind of jumping in and upsetting the apple cart a little bit. And it absolutely goes back to what we were saying there about supply and demand. When there was 1,800 properties, buyers had choice. When there's 942, which is half, then actually buyers don't have choice, but they still need to move. As I mentioned earlier, they've still got all these life things that are taking place. They're getting married, they're having a baby, they've had a loss in their family, which is a sad situation, of course. They may be changing schools, they're changing jobs. So those people still needed to move. There wasn't a lot of choice in regards to what property was available. There was half in the span of 2-year window. And so those people were paying a hell of a lot more to get that house and to secure it because they needed that home no matter what. And we're still seeing a little pain of that for some people, because some of the people that bought in that window were paying excessively over the home reports, maybe now are ready to sell, and actually maybe it's not caught up with what they anticipated, what they paid for the property. So there's something to kind of keep in mind there as well. So that was an interesting one. Then we get to January 23, and it's jumped back up to 1,577. So again, you're kind of climbed by another 500. So we're starting to see things kind of slow down a little bit in regards to the offers over prices. The benefit, though, anybody bringing the property to market then is comparing to what sold previously. So actually their home report benefited anyway, because their home report went up. So it was great for those people that were coming to market then. We then go to January of 24. And that, again, was very similar numbers to the previous year. And then we get to 2026. And at this moment in time, there's 1,415. So actually not quite to the 2020 stages. We're about 400 adrift. We're sitting really just kind of before the pandemic is really where we're at in regards to what there is coming to market. So the pandemic, as I mentioned, did cause many Fife homeowners to reassess basically what they wanted from life as well, and what they wanted from a home. They wanted bigger rooms, they wanted more space. All of those things became a priority just because their lifestyle had changed. Let's be honest, none of us had really worked from home. It was a taboo, wasn't it? And if we were being honest, a lot of employers thought, nah, you're not working at home, because if you're working at home, you're putting the washing machine on, you're doing your hoovering, you're ordering your shopping, you're not actually working. But actually, it was such a success, and people were more productive. Because we're not caught up in all of that noise in the workplace. So actually it became a thing, didn't it? So that's why people needed more space, because their actual lifestyle was changing, how they utilized their rooms were changing. They needed home office space. We go to many houses, Sophie, don't we, where actually both owners, if it's jointly owned, can work from home. And so how do they make that happen and have that privacy space as well? Because you can't have two desks set up in the dining room or the lounge. You have to have a space to do that. So there was a whole shift in how people were working and living, wasn't there?
There was.
So literally it was kind of dubbed the race for space, wasn't it? If you want to put it.
You saw people being so inventive, and this is where social media has its positives, where people were using, the space under the stairs. If it was perhaps open, they were fashioning things into there. Or if they had little nooks in the house, like, people got really inventive of how to actually create that working from home space. And
they absolutely did, but not even just agents using that creativity, because we see that a lot, of course. But I was out doing a valuation on a property last week, and it was a 2-bedroom apartment and the attic had been converted to a bedroom. So to get to it, you had to kind of come through the hallway. The bedrooms, bathrooms, lounge was underneath, and then the second bedroom was upstairs. And as you came through into the back hallway, which was where the stairs had been put to take you up to the attic conversion, there was an area, and he says, oh, and this is the study. And I was like, very good, it is a study. But it wasn't a study, it was an area under the stairs. But you could quite easily put a desk under there, you could put cabinets under there, you could have a printer in there, you could have a desk chair. So suddenly it becomes a study. So it's really quite interesting how the race for space has changed people's minds, and they have become inventive. And it's not just agencies putting a spin on it, the actual sellers are doing it themselves now. Excuse me. So the race for space in 2020 was definitely a big thing. 21 accelerated moves and made many families that planned maybe to move later in life to actually go then. Because again, what was happening was that there was that realization where maybe there was distance between groups of families, wasn't there? So parents maybe lived further afield and you hadn't seen them for a long time. Maybe you lost one of them because it was COVID, which obviously is very sad. But what people were doing in 23 were saying, well, actually, why don't we just bring everyone together? So suddenly they were selling 2 homes and they were coming together into 1 home, because people really missed their families and had that realization of what was important. And suddenly it was like, well, let's do that and we can all live together. So in 23, we did see a big uptake in that as well, and families readjusting what they wanted to do. So that was, for me, a really, really interesting one. And as more people wanted to buy, of course, then demand increased. People bought homes, therefore the supply decreased. And there was not enough Fife homes basically at that time to meet the demand, which inevitably, as you mentioned earlier, Sophie, will push prices up. It's just what happens. If you think about it, even in logical terms, we've all just gone through the seasonality time of Christmas, and think about, I certainly remember when my boys were wee, which was the first Christmas, they probably was about 96, and it was when Toy Story had just come out that year, and everyone was going crazy for Buzz Lightyear and for Woody, and you couldn't get them for love nor money, and people were scouring the country. Well, it almost became a little bit like that for property, because there wasn't anything available, so what did come up, everybody wanted. And so it was fantastic for the seller. And buyers had to be quite brave, actually, in that time. So, you know, if you've created a supply of something, then it's different. But if that supply is hindered, but the demand is still there, then it definitely drives the prices. So that's definitely something that we saw then. Some people could ask, however, with the number of Fife homes on the market, does that mean we will be heading for a house price crash? Honestly, how many times we heard that in COVID? When we were coming out of COVID, everyone was saying the house property market is going to crash. And what happened? The actual opposite happened, and property went like that, didn't it? And then it plateaued, and then it's went up a little bit more again. And so for us, it's really, for me, it's been quite steady. We don't have a crystal ball, as we mentioned earlier. We can't predict what's going to happen, but we've got good sources of information that's available to us. And absolutely what we would see at the moment is the market is steady. It's still a strong market. People are still selling for offers over their home report. Okay, it's not to the dramatic numbers we saw in that COVID post period. But actually, people are really doing well. When we launched that properties on Boxing Day, we had fantastic results, great offers, real offers as well, and true buyers by New Year's Eve, because again, at the moment, there isn't that much property out there. And so people are still got life choices that they're making and want to move. So when they see that thing that's come up that ticks a lot of the boxes, they just go all in to get it. So it really depends on what your motivation is, I guess, as a buyer, isn't it? And what your motivation is as a seller. But at this moment in time, we absolutely are seeing a steady flow in regards to how the property market is going. And we are seeing increase on increase year on year still. So we absolutely have not seen a downturn. But actually, if that did happen, would that be the end of things? Generally, your average person moves between every 5-7 years. So if you bought a house today and your plan is to raise your family in that home, and say the property by the end of this year did depreciate to a degree, the chances are by the time you get to your year 5, 6, or 7, it's probably gone back up again. And so you have to keep that in mind. But also, if it did happen and then you had to sell up and you had to move to a bigger home or a lesser home, all of those other homes have been affected by the same percentages. So actually the reality is it's the same.
Yep.
So it doesn't really impact you, because if yours goes down, the one you're buying is going down. If yours goes up, the one you're buying is going up. So those percentages, positive or negative, apply when you're selling and when you're buying, no matter what the window of time is, because everyone is impacted the same. So at this moment, it wouldn't be something that I would be concerned about. But actually, we are seeing quite a steady market at the moment. It's early into the year, of course, but let's see what happens.
Absolutely. And this is where you'd obviously touched on it, Perrie. The market update that I do every week gives you a great insight. Now, 2 weeks ago, I did the update and it had the 2025 roundup and a December roundup, and numbers that people won't be expecting. Just yesterday, I did the one for the first week back in January. So again, if you are keen and understanding and really watching the marketplace, that weekly update every Tuesday gives you a great insight into what's taking place. And as Perrie's mentioned, I break it down into micro regions so we can make it as relevant to you and where your home is. But you reach out if you want to get a better insight into your particular area and what your property could look like.
Not only that, if you look at the supplies we talk about, the supply of property in the market, it's certainly higher. Will that make a difference? Will it cause a crash? If you look at the what's available, yes, the property is higher if you compare it, say, to a few years ago. But if you even go back to, say, 2008, when the property crash really happened and the whole financial sector crashed as well, the number of homes for sale in Fife at that time was between 2,700 and 3,000 homes.
Wow.
That's 2.5 times what is available just now. So unless supply levels really do get back to that peak points, for me, really, things should be okay and should pretty much stay as they are. I'll be very surprised unless there is a massive exodus from the market with landlords, or an influx of people deciding to sell, but you're talking about literally doubling and more what is available just now before you would ever see that type of movement. So for us, as I say, I think it'll be pretty steady. It's still early to tell. Of course, we're literally just starting 2026, and the whole point of this discussion is to give you an insight into what that may look like. Most commentators agree that a major crash is unlikely given the excess of supply. And as I mentioned earlier, even listening to Phil Spencer yesterday, he was saying exactly that. It's too early to tell, but actually we've seen the highest activity, people coming to market in regards to buyers. So that's a positive thing because the supply is still not there yet. So that keeps it in a positive step going into the year. I think personally it will be the end of the first quarter of this year. I think we'll be into maybe April, May before we get an inclination really of where we think this year is going to pan out in regards to property. So we talked about supply there. Let's talk about the demand for Fife homes as well. Sophie, what does that look like?
Yeah, so this is obviously measured by the number of homes that sell. So just like we did for supply, we're going to break down over the years what that means for demand. So again, we're going to rewind back to 2020. There was 4,822 Fife homes changed hands. So they went through missives and they then concluded. In 2021, this rose to 6,105. So that was a big jump as that kind of post-pandemic rush really did kick in. As we say, that was 2021. Then it comes down in 2022 to around 5,737. So you can see obviously from 2020 to 2022, obviously the change from 4,822 to that then 5,737. But then when we then fast forward to 2023, 5,073 properties changed hands in that year. And then 5,433 in 2024. Now, obviously, in 2025, just last year, there was 5,417 homes that changed hands. So in that 5-year window where it started off as 4,822, it then ended in 2025 at 5,417, which actually is obviously more than the 2024, more than 2023. So you can see there that the demand was high coming out of 2025. So
and those numbers sound quite a lot, don't they, in the differences? But actually, when you break that down from 2020 at 4,822 versus 2025 at 5,417, it actually is roughly 600 homes.
Yep.
Break that over 12 months, it's 20 homes a month. It's 4 additional homes per week. And when you break it down like that, actually, the reality is that's quite steady, isn't it?
And when you think of obviously what the area covers as well, from your KY1 to 12 to then your 14 to 16, when you do actually think that extra 4, when you spread it out across 5, it's really not that, it's marginal, absolutely. Now, obviously, demand, it's primarily driven by mortgage availability. Obviously, as you touched on, Perrie, what that looked like in terms of rates towards the end of the year, and also affordability. Now, rewinding right back to 2007, mortgage rates sat between 6.5 and 7.5%. And actually, when the economy weakened and unemployment rose by over 60% in just a couple of years, many households were obviously forced to sell. Then, though, at the same time, the credit crunch hit the economy, and that credit crunch then substantially reduced mortgage availability, which then obviously naturally demand dropped, which obviously is to be expected. And this time around, most homeowners are on a mortgage of anywhere from, let's say, 3% to 5%. Obviously, where you sit within that. Now, real wages are increasing and unemployment is low and stable. So there is far less pressure, we could say, that is forcing people to sell their Fife homes.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when you then look at that demand and you look at that information, this is then where we say it comes back to that buyer confidence.
Yeah.
You will absolutely see that. But again, this is where it is key. And yes, we give you these shows and this information to help guide you into what obviously next steps look like. But when we're discussing mortgage rates, it's key to do your homework in that as well. Think about who you're approaching for that. Look at perhaps a mortgage advisor, because they have a lot more availability in the marketplace for different rates and different deals. So do your homework in that sense as well, and really look at what you're entering into before obviously you do anything. And that's something you've touched on before in shows as well, Perrie, about think about your 5-year fixed and what that looks like, because obviously that's giving you your time. So really do your homework in terms of mortgage rates and what that looks like for your lending as well. But I think probably a question that people are wondering, Perrie, is 2026 the right time to buy your first home in Fife?
I think for me, really, that's a question that applies to each individual person. I think in 2026, is it the right time to move home in Fife? Your personal circumstances really dictate that. And I've spoken about that a lot. They really do dictate that. And really, that is the most important part, rather than actually market timing. Why are you needing to move? What's impacting your life really determines when it's the right time for you to go as well. So for me, I think your personal circumstance will dictate that rather than market timing. And that's something that you really need to look at. But in the right Fife home, if the right Fife home is available to you and it's affordable, it suits your needs, delaying it can actually be counterproductive for me. And this is a conversation actually that I had with a client yesterday. So it's two families, exactly what we spoke about earlier, two families selling two homes, coming together as one. They've got a new grandbaby. They've lived in Fife a couple of years and they're looking to kind of relocate within Fife to one home that works for everybody, whether that's a large home, granny annex, whatever it looks like for them. So actually, if something like that came up and you waited to see what would happen, who's to say another home like that would come up again in the next 12 months? So you may not get the dream home that works for all your family. You're going to be in your same position for the next 12 months. The values all say stable, for instance, say that happens, then actually you've kind of wasted a year. And, we don't know what next year might look like. So people are scared of the unknown, aren't they? But actually, I often have this conversation with clients as well where, I don't know, there isn't much property on the market just now. I've heard people aren't listing, and they've got all their stories that they're hearing from their auntie, their dog, their brother, all sorts of things. When the reality is that really actually what you need to just focus on is gaining some facts, understanding what's important to you, taking that guidance from an agent that's educated on your location, and just making the choice that actually works for your family. And we have clients often who will say, I don't really want to sell until I find something. Well, okay, multiply that across Fife then, and 90% of people are thinking the same that you think. Someone has to go first. We need, the market needs the houses to come to market for people to move. So someone needs to take that leap of faith. And often I've had this situation where clients have said, no, I'm going to wait. I need this. I'm very specific about the type of property that I need for my next home. And then, so they wait and they do nothing and they don't go to market. And then what happens is their dream home comes up tomorrow. You've had it yourself, Sophie. And then everything has to go at 100 miles an hour. And they've put so much pressure on themselves because it is their dream home. They really want it. But actually, it's maybe 5 other people's dream home as well. And so the seller suddenly has got 5 other people who are in a position where they're ready to go and can offer. And then person number 6, who's the one that waited for the dream home and didn't do anything about it to get it as far as selling their own, is not in that position. And the seller says, well, actually, they're not even on the market yet. They're not a serious buyer for me, so discount them straight away. So then what do you do? Do you wait another 6 months, a year for the next dream home to come up? Because actually, the cycle will just repeat itself.
And that is the scary thing. And some people do that. They absolutely do go, oh, I've missed out on that one. Now I'm just going to stop looking.
Yeah.
And you're no further forward.
No.
You are no further forward.
But your circumstances didn't change. The reason you were looking in the first place is still there. So actually, it really is all about timing for yourself, as I say. So buying your home for me as well, it's a long-term commitment. It's rare, really, that people will buy a home and sell sooner than 5 years, stroke 7 years, unless something major's changed in life, but the plan generally is that, and people won't, they'll go for their 5-year fixed mortgage if they need a mortgage. And so that's your plan, isn't it? So for me, it's rare that will happen. So often spanning over your life, is waiting the right thing to do? The answer to that is no. Your life circle doesn't change, so you have to work with that. Waiting endlessly for that perfect moment as well can actually feel like you're never going to get started.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I've had clients who've done that, and then suddenly they've said, you know what, actually, I'm going to take your guidance, and we've really thought about it. We've talked to our family, we've worked it out, and we're going to take that leap of faith. They take that leap of faith, they get a buyer really quickly. Okay, there's a little bit of uncertainty, and there's a little bit of unease, and maybe a little bit of panic, if you want to use that word, because you're thinking, oh, we've sold our house, where are we going to go? But at the end of the day, as an agent, it's our job to make sure that you move when you're ready. Just because you're under offer doesn't mean to say you have to be out your house in 4 weeks' time. You leave the property when you're ready. If you find a buyer who's not willing to wait for you, then you wait and you get the next buyer. But you have to get yourself in a position of strength and get that offer. 9 times out of 10, you'll be really surprised actually how nicely it works. And we've had numerous clients recently when that's happened with, where they've been really nervous about it. They've done it and they've thanked us for it, because they said, now I've got my dream home, and it would never have happened if I didn't listen to you at the beginning. So your circumstances absolutely do drive what you do next. So for me, getting started is the really important part. Remember, recently we've spoken about this, mortgage payments for first-time buyers. You mentioned it earlier. The rates that they were nationally, they were sitting at one point at 26%. I remember when that happened. Now we're sitting between 3-5%. So affordability is there, income is there, job security is there. It would take something really catalytic to come into play to really have a massive knock-on effect for me. So I think move when you need to move, take the steps that you need to take, and only you can decide that. The market actually shouldn't be the thing that dictates it. You should dictate it with what's happening in your life. Every month you wait is another month as well where you've wasted, especially if you're in rental accommodation. So if you're sitting in rented and you're looking to be a first-time buyer, you've got great first-time buyer deals out there. You mentioned earlier at price points, even Sophie, where people generally, your average first-time buyer at the moment is spending about 180,000, but we are seeing people, first-time buyers, buying property in excess of 300,000, because actually your first-time buyer is not. When I was a first-time buyer, I was 24. Your first-time buyer today, on average, is in their early 30s. So they're secure in their career, they're comfortable with what they're earning, they know, chances are you're both working and have got good salaries and stable jobs. So you're in a really strong position now. And that's why they can afford to go for that increased price in property, because they're thinking, I don't want to move again. This is our plan. We're going to start a family and we're going to raise them in this home. So we're happy to go with that. So see what I'm saying there? All of the things are about activity that's happening in their lives that's making those choices for them to move. And so that's the thing for me that really matters. But as I was going to say there as well, if you're in rented, every month that you're in rented, if you're a first-time buyer, is wasted money.
100%. Absolutely. You're not gaining anything whatsoever.
You're not having any investment from that. It's harder to save. So, the quicker you move, the better. If you wait a year, that's a year of equity you've missed. It's a year of eating into your equity that you've missed because you've paid off a year of your mortgage payment. So, you've got a two-pronged win there. Your property, chances are your property's gone up in value and you've paid off some of your mortgage. So your equity has increased. So actually, the sooner you go, if you're a first-time buyer, again, the better, if you're in a position to do that and you've got your deposits and your mortgage and principal and all those things in place. Low interest rates are really helping with that as well. And it means that there's still attractive mortgage deals out there. If you've got a solid deposit, you've got even better deals out there, particularly on fixed rates. I've got a client at the moment who's buying a large property who's done exactly that. And they've got a fantastic deal and they are over the moon now that they've managed to secure that home. So, that's a real success story. But buyers with more modest deposits can still get around about 5% on a mortgage deal. And that's even with just a 5% deposit. You don't have to have 25, 30, 40% deposit. obviously that deposit changes depending on the value of the house, because it's all verged against the property value at the end of the day. You know, you might have a slightly higher interest rate, but there's still competitive rates at the moment, even if you've just got a 5% deposit. So, you know, that's a strong position for people to be in, and certainly better than it was 18 months ago. I know 18 months ago, we were at the point where we were looking at our new mortgage deal and our mortgage rate went up to over 6.5%. When I moved into the property, our mortgage rate was 2.2. So it's all different, but it's relevant, isn't it? And so we've hit into our equity now. We've got a better deal now. And so that's where, if you eat into that equity, it makes a big difference to you. So for first-time buyers, getting ahead of the game is definitely the key for me. And landlords as well actually should be pleased, because house prices are remaining steady. So they've had a really good return on their investment. Rents are rising above the inflation rates at the moment, in many cases. So it's really boosting that rental yield as well for landlords, which again is important because they provide a great service. I know we talk about rental as wasted money if you're the tenant, but actually, if you're not in a position where you've got that deposit and you need to save, or you've got something going on in life where actually you've not got a long-term plan in that location, you're maybe in your kind of development phase of your career, and you know you're going to be moving, you might not want to spend money buying a house because it might be wasted. So, you know, you might want to rent for a couple of years. So actually that's great for landlords as well. So they're getting a good return on their investment, but they're providing a vital service as well to the people who do require that tenancy, because obviously Fife Council aren't building as many houses as is needed. So that private sector is always going to be required.
Absolutely.
But I think as well, if you take the wider view, I mean, obviously this is all opinion rather than guarantees. We can't give guarantees. That there's no crystal ball. No one has an idea of what's happening. But if inflation kind of stays as it is and interest rates ease slightly, Fife house prices are likely to continue to rise. Now, okay, they're not going to be rising by astronomical sums, but if they're rising year on year, you're still gaining a return on it. If we look at 2026 and beyond, for me, my thought is that it'll be a kind of slower pace than 2020 and 2021 for obvious reasons. The pandemic, of course. You know, you might have the short let-ups now and again in between that period of time, but I think you'll have ups and downs along the way. But in the main, I think it's going to be pretty steady for 2026. And I think that mortgage rates are making that a bit more competitive for people. So it's bringing that first-time buyer to market, which is really the foundation of the property ladder. If they're coming to market, then everything else is moving. So for me, I think that's going to be really important. So I think really from there then, you know, where will Fife prices be in 12 months? What do you think?
And you know what, as we've said, we can't say this is solid, this is absolutely what's going to happen. There's no guarantees. All we could probably say is there will perhaps be anything from a 1 to 2% growth in Fife houses in 2026, which is similar to 2025. Of course, this is an average, and some types of homes and also locations within Fife will outperform that, or perhaps just stay the same depending on where your demographic is, while others obviously will be behind that. And that's where there is difference, and it is key to understand your specific area and compare, and don't compare to a completely different location and a completely different footprint. You have to look at what's around you. But I would say a modest 1 to 2% growth in 2026, but we will get a better idea as we continue through the months and really get into the kind of April, May time. But the key, and obviously we've discussed this in great length, is the affordability. Plan for future rate rises, building that financial resilience, almost have just that little backup plan and just have that there just in case, and make decisions that work for your own circumstances. And we can't stress this enough. Just focus on you and your current circumstances and switch off all the other noise and everything else that's going on. And fingers crossed, all of that put together means that you'll be well placed regardless of what happens to that marketplace, because you have built that resilience and you have given yourself all of that to help you into that journey, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good final point, actually. And for me, you know, we talk about this often. These are our views, of course, and our thoughts. We would really welcome your thoughts and viewpoint on it as well, because again, it gives us the opportunity to share it with the wider audience. And we absolutely welcome input from others, because the more information we have, the more of a handle we can get on what's happening, isn't it? I think my final words on it are probably be smart, understand your market. If you're selling, price it right. Pick an agent that's going to get you that strategy and that wide audience. And if you're a first-time buyer, do your homework, understand your price points, understand your budgets, and plan against that. And don't do it to the point of overstretch. Leave yourself that little wiggle room would be my thing. And then you'll have a comfortable life.
Yeah. Sounds perfect.
And that's it from me.
Yeah, well, there we go. What a great, obviously, one to start the year with. And obviously, we will see you on future shows. But if there's anything on the meantime, reach out to us. We are always here. But for now, all the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye for now.